That's Hold On Hollywood. They're up 22 to number 15 on the secondary active rock radio charts. And now we've been playing this band on our flagship station since I'd say like 2007-ish or so. And there was a bit of a hiatus in there, but hey, they're back. And this man that I'm speaking to right now, he never ceases to amaze me as far as his producing knowledge, his credits go, his music, his artistry. I'm honored to be with the greatness that is Sahaj from Ra. How are you today, my friend?
I am not too shabby. A little fat and a little old, but I'm good.
Hey, well, that's what. Since I last saw you, I'm getting very, very old too. So I'm not gonna hold that against you. Intercorrupted is the title track off your new album. We started playing this a few weeks ago, and it was kind of interesting when it was sent to me, because as soon as I saw Raw, I didn't even listen to the song. I just added it to the flagship station. I was like,
Nice.
no way. And the song is really doing well, man. You guys are like, we have a little feature here on Real Rock Nice, Fan the Flames. And the songs that Foundations charts, like puts their little flame icon by because they're the hot track. And I got a feeling that I'll be fanning your flames next week, man.
Nice. Always good when guys with long hair fan my flames. So I'm married, but I'm still, looking for the good flan fame.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll talk about that later when we're not live. How about that? Hey, have you guys settled on how many tracks we can look forward to on this new album?
There are 12 songs on the record and one bonus track.
One bonus track.
Yeah.
And are you looking at this is on down the road too. So are you looking to maybe giving us a little bit more as far as bonus material goes?
No, I only have one bonus track, but I mean, the way you have to release records these days, I'm going to have to put out at least 3 or 4 songs before the album drops anyway. Like there's the radio song, then there's the internet song, then there's the internet radio song, then there's the radio internet song. So
it's a different landscape. It really is. What I always liked about your stuff was you always are able to intertwine your music with ideals and like really, really good theory. And is that something that you think about when you're writing, or does that just kind of happen?
I mean, I'm assuming when you say like intertwine with theory, meaning like that it's somewhat sort of psychoanalytically relevant.
Yes, exactly.
So the birth of the band coincided sort of with the birth of my explorations into meditation and sort of Eastern philosophy and things like that. Now I'm neither super religious, nor am I like super into, I'm not a hippie guy, but I've studied so much of it. I spent 7 or 8 years reading book after book after book after book about Eastern philosophy, whether it had to do with Zen patriarchs or Jainism or Hinduism or Buddhism or all of the things. I studied a lot of that when I was like, I would say like from 19 to 28. It was literally all I breathed and ate. And during that time, I was also formulating what would eventually become Ra. So I guess the mission of the band was always to try and be socially conscious, but not about, I find bands that are talking about current events or sort of the superficial aspects of how people behave, those messages tend to be sort of time, they're married to the time that they come out.
Yes.
Even listening, it's funny, the lyric that keeps popping up into my brain, the Rage Against the Machine lyric that keeps popping up into my brain all the time, and weirdly how relevant it is today, is rolling down Rodeo with a pocket full of shells. Like that line for me, it's like, it shouldn't be relevant, and it still is. And it still means the same thing it did back in that day. If anything, it means more today than it did back in those days. And it's sort of like, if you're not going to be able to do that kind of social commentary where it's going to be relevant 20 years later, I feel like it's better to either just write love songs or to really, really focus on something that is sort of a universal truth. So the Ra thing, you know, I mean, obviously we named it the main Egyptian god. It has to do with the sun, which is really why I named it the band, because I was obsessed with Sting, who wrote about the moon all the time. So I was like, well, I'm going to write about the sun all the time.
It went the other way.
Yeah. So I wanted to write about the sun, but then that led it to being called Ra. And then I just sort of like, it just was a timing thing. So the first song that broke for us was Do You Call My Name? And Do You Call My Name is sort of like a person who's suffering from clinical depression, sort of expressing how society treats them. That's, you know, and society tends to consider people with clinical depression lazy or not motivated or whatever it is. And that was the song. Now, I always joke because so many people heard that song for the first time on Tiger Woods Golf 3.
Oh.
So because, you know, this incredibly deep song about how society sees clinical depression was seen on a game basically about the most elitist, self-centered game sport ever in the world. And plus, you know, he's like at a par 9 trying to get a par 5 trying to get a putt in, and they're singing about this, you know, depressed guy. But that's how a lot of people heard the song on that. And but it was always sort of the bar I wanted to reach. I always wanted to make sure that the overarching theme of all the Ra stuff was in the cheesiest form, hope, but in the more ambitious form, evolution. And so I always try and talk about things that are in the name of evolving. And I guess in the last 4 or 5 years, I wouldn't imagine what happened in the last 4 or 5 years to make me think this way. But in the last 4 or 5 years, there's been so much in the name of division, like things that are not, I'm not even talking about the division itself. You know, it went from things happen and then you're divided to now things happen so that you're divided.
Yes.
You know, it used to be a byproduct of something happening. Now it happens as a manner of running, whether it be politics or the news media or even video games and or the YouTube society. That you know, everything is sort of now enforced and driven by negative reinforcement. Everything is always, you know, it's like we put out the video for Intercorrupted, and the video is completely way too ambitious and crazy and out of control.
I think it's cool.
Well, I'm glad you like it, but we, you know, I had done a couple of videos with an artist called Maytal, who's Maytal Cohen. She's like a big YouTube star.
Okay.
I did a couple of videos, and you know, she has a huge YouTube following, millions of people. And you know, it's funny. I would read the comments on these videos, and it was like, really good, really good, really good, really good, good, really good, really good, one bad one. And I'd be like, oh no, like I'm obsessed, like the one bad comment. And then I just realized we've all been conditioned.
That's what everybody focuses on.
Well, we've been denied sort of our own self-satisfaction. We don't get to measure our successes because all of our failures are the things that we're measured by. We're never measured by our success. We're only remembered for the things we didn't do well in our mind. We're taught this.
Yep.
And, you know, so when we did this new video, I spend half of my time avoiding reading the comments, and they're all good. There's like a couple of bad ones down at the bottom, but they're all good. And all I can think about is the fact that even me, after I'm older, social media showed up in my part of in the latter part of my life. So why am I so susceptible to it? Why am I not able to sort of see beyond it and that led me to writing the song, because the song Intercorrupted is literally realizing that we don't accept our own responsibility for creating our opponents, our tribalism, the other side. We create the other side. The other side does not exist in a vacuum. So if there is another side to your life, if there is some sort of adversary, whether it's the YouTube community or if it's politics or it's people at work or whatever it is, we have to start absorbing and redefining our baseline of who we are. We're not perfect. We're not great. We're not starting out from this place where we're such awesome people and everyone else is wrong. So the second we start understanding that we're intercorrupted, that we're corrupted together, your corruption is not separate to mine. I'm creating the energy that you're using to fuel your own corruption, your anger. If I'm on Facebook fighting with you about something ridiculous that I don't have all the information on and you don't have all the information on, all we're doing is fueling our separateness. But the zen of that is that in fueling our separateness, we end up connected and enmeshed, and we're emotionally completely chained together with people we don't even know.
Yeah.
And that's sort of, so that was the spawn of the song. And, I keep telling, every time I do an interview, I say this, the last line of the chorus, because I think the last line of the chorus is the moral of the story in this particular song. And the last line of the chorus is, it's too dark for the world to see the light between you and me. And that's sort of where we're at in a nutshell. Everybody has this connecting rod, our energy, we connect with people instantly. Even foreigners in other countries on the internet, we instantly connect with them.
Yep.
And then it's the darkness that sinks into it that completely erases any kind of higher level consciousness. So continuing with the Ra mission, which was always started out with trying to, use metaphors for psychoanalyzing ourselves. This album is going to be extremely focused on passion versus compassion, and togetherness versus awareness of yourself and awareness of who and what you are. So the whole album is sort of trying to play games with our state of mind right now, which, we've all seen The Social Dilemma. Our state of mind is, now we only own a percentage of it.
Yeah.
We don't even get to keep, we used, when I grew up, I thought I had 100% of my perception. I thought I could literally control how I saw the world.
Yeah, exactly.
And now I have to be honest and understand that the things that I want, see, and need are only 60-70% me, and 30% something that's telling me that that's what I want.
Yeah.
And it's very, very frightening, but it's also, in a weird way, and this is a very odd way to go into this, but it's sort of changing the world into a global mind, a global synapse set, where you're literally, we're all becoming sort of pieces of this global brain that is firing off in all different directions. And we end up as a piece in that puzzle and not so much the whole thing, which is why sort of the division where we're at right now, as horrible as it is, I'm not that hopeless yet, because I feel like it's by spreading those really, really far to the side is how the center is going to become clear.
Okay.
And that's sort of my hopefulness. And there's a lot of that on the record.
I guess I never thought of it that way. You really make sense as far as the whole thing, talking globally, and it's almost like a net of negativity.
But again, going back to my YouTube example, it's a net of negativity in our perception. The reality is that it's probably 80% positive, and we only see the 20%.
We see the negative.
It's the same thing that it's like, I'm not going to get right wing, left wing on this, but certain parts of society, we choose to see the most extreme versions of whatever's happening. So if you're super right, you see only the far left people and you think everyone's like that. And if you're super left, then you see only the far right people and you think all of them are like that. And the generalization of that, first of all, is the most simple, it's the easiest way to control people if you push them to the edges, because if you have to decide that someone on the other side actually might be a lot more like you than you want to admit, then you have to admit that there's gray area. And as soon as there's gray area, you're giving up some of your power.
And yeah,
But it's not a it's and getting back to the hopefulness of it, I honestly see that there's just going to be a middle that coalesces and ultimately gets tired of the extremes, and the extremes will be instantly recognizable. I think the reason why it's so bad right now is we don't have the faculties as human beings. We don't have the experience, or even really, we're not genetically encoded to have 24-hour information hurled at us all the time.
So I wonder, what do you think? Do you think that you're talking about the 24-hour information hurled at us, and a lot of that information that we're getting is not correct because they want to put so much of it out there? What do you think? How do I word this? I guess, what do you think the effect is essentially going to be like 10 years on down the road?
I think 10 years down the road, we're not going to be that much further than we are now. But I think 50 years down the road, I think the way that the economy is going to shift, right? Because 50 years from now, the economy is going to shift dramatically. Artificial intelligence is going to run massive amounts of things that human beings do now. Okay. They're talking about fleets of cars that you get an app on your phone. This is something that's happening right now.
Yeah.
You get fleets of cars. You don't have to lease a car. You don't have to own a car. There are fleets of robot cars that will come to your house within 10, 15 minutes of you requesting it and take you wherever you have to go. You won't, it will cost as much as leasing an inexpensive vehicle monthly. Now, just that in itself puts out taxi drivers, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I've been saying Uber and Lyft drivers are a patch this entire time. It's absolutely a segue into autonomous vehicles. But the economy is going to shift, and those vehicles are probably going to be electric. And there's going to be so many aspects of what we think is normal right now. But because technology is ramping at an exponential rate that's so crazy, the idea of, the idea of a solar car at this point that doesn't have to be plugged in is maybe 10 to 15 years off. You'll be able to have cars that run off solar power because the panels themselves will become so efficient that you'll be able to have a car, drive it out for a few hours and and it'll be fully charged.
In that same vein, what do you see happening as far as you're talking about all this AI? What do you see that doing to the music business?
I mean, I think the music business has already sort of suffered its major shift. And one of the major shifts is that music production, the amount of sounds that you can artificially create. And when I say artificially create, I'm including recording jazz instruments or classical. When you artificially recreate it, it's a recording that's fake that you're listening to. Mm-hmm. So anything that can be recorded or generated in an audio sense, we're running out of stuff to do. The technology that affects audio has not evolved at the rate at which technology for everything else has evolved. Okay. We're still doing the same things with guitars that they did in the 80s. We're still doing this. We're still recording real drums the way they recorded them 50 years ago. So we're not evolving because essentially the instruments themselves are somewhat limited. There's only certain perceptible frequencies that a human ear can hear. Yeah. So again, going to what is the music industry eventually going to become? Mm-hmm. It already is. And that's that it's personality driven. It is character driven. It is absolutely singer driven. So you can take Post Malone or Billie Eilish or anyone else or Drake or Ariana Grande, or if you're a rock guy, your Shinedown dudes, or your Disturbs, your Five Fingers, whatever it is that you like, right? Mm-hmm. You dissect them. If you dissect them honestly and you take away the vocals, there are a million bands it can be, but it's always the singer that is the
that makes
person
it stand out.
that gives you the defining character. Now, there have been exceptions to that, right? That, you know, System of a Down just dropped 2 new songs, and their style is so recognizable, even instrumentally, that if you're educated enough, you could say, "Whoa, that's a System of a Down song," without even anybody singing it. But they are the exception to the rule, as is Rage Against the Machine or Tom Morello or any of those people who come from an era where the musicianship was prioritized prior to anything else. We don't have that anymore.
Musicians used to, like, a lot of times, create their own sound. They would create a lot of their own equipment.
Right, but now that
give them a sound.
But now the problem is that the music industry has become a essentially a mirror of what social media is, and that's a race for attention. So all you're trying to do is figure out the fastest way to get somebody's attention and keep their attention. Okay. So in the old days, when Bruce Springsteen wrote Born to Run, the intention with that song was to be the voice of a generation. And people would listen to those records for years and years and years. I mean, even for me, Freak on a Leash or And Justice for All or the Black Album or Sting's Dream of the Blue Turtles, those were records I listened to for years, not for weeks.
Yeah.
But as technology became cheaper, it allowed more and more music to be created. And because music was cheaper to create, there was tons and tons of more volume. And ultimately, the dilution between keeping up with trends, because now trends cycle much faster, right? So in the old days, if you were Jimi Hendrix, you know, by the time the other Jimi Hendrixes tried to get out, it was a year later. Now you write a song, and if Post Malone puts out a cool song, I'm using it the next day.
The next day you're sampling
for a song. For a song that's probably going to come out in 2 or 3 months.
It's like, well, look where you're sitting right now. I mean, you have your own studio. You can create stuff at a whim.
Yeah, and on top of that, the shelf life of music, people complain, oh, music is it's music of the moment. It doesn't have the longevity, but it's designed that way specifically because the audience's attention span is so short. So if you're dealing with somebody that's glued to their device all day long, then the only way you get their attention is by releasing new content. Because every single time they look at their phone and they've already listened to your song 10 times, they might love it. It might be their favorite song, but there's something new popping up on that screen that day that's there to take their attention away from you. So the way songs are written now, they're designed in a way that makes them have less, I call this less front to back depth, in the sense that you listen to the song one time, you get more of the picture in one listen than in the old days. In the old days, you listen to Zeppelin, you'd hear the drums one way, you'd hear the guitars one way, you'd hear the vocals one way, and then the second time you listened, you hear more stuff. Because it wasn't perfect, because it wasn't completely lifeless, and you would know that, oh, the second verse sort of feels a little different than the first verse. And this is now everything is sort of processed the same way. So everything is very, very, very linear. And even though things can be beautiful and well done, they're still they're perfected to a level that makes them a little too easy to listen to. You know, someone like Billie Eilish is such a perfect example, because her brother Phineas makes the music, it's fantastic. Even though it's still doing what I'm talking about, it's fantastic from the perspective of the creativity and what he's doing with the programming, and he's really, really addressing the frequencies and everything in a very, very high level. But all of it is really designed to be a backdrop for Billie Eilish's voice, which ultimately has all the character and nuance that people don't get nowadays. So the explanation for newer music for me is the more successful the singer is in injecting authenticity, detail, and personality, they're going to do better in the new model, because it's all about vocal depth, color, and width. Even someone like Ollie from Bring Me the Horizon, he is technically Like if technically, if I put him in a room on a stage, he's not a great singer, but his studio chops and his ability to manipulate moment to moment singing
Okay.
in the studio environment is masterful. And they, you know, and it includes the people that edit him and put him together, but it's a very, very palpable difference between certain singers and the reaction that they get. And I think that that's ultimately what the music industry is going to have. And I mean, I say going to have to, if they already have. It's been
Yeah.
this way now since, as far as I can think of, probably the mid 2000s. You know, once pop music started to become less, not just Backstreet Boys and NSYNC, when pop music took a turn and started showing layers of interesting stuff, and Sia showed up, and people with real sort of vocal and emotional character showed up, that's when this new paradigm has sort of entered into full
When it took
fledged.
over. Okay. From when you produce, uh, how do you try to get away from that? You know, how you were saying that like everything is so linear now. And how do you try to get away from the copy and paste mentality of the music and try to put some of that like original, almost analog type of way of recording into the music?
I would say that it's so unbelievably subjective from character, from artist to artist. So I work with a band called Starset.
Okay.
I work with, I have six Starset songs, including the first single off of the last record. And Dustin, who is a vision guy, he's not a, he is looking for very specific components that make up a song that he likes. So it's not just, is he a good singer? Is he just this? Is he just connecting to the audience? That band is a massive concept. It has a storyline. It has, they wear spacesuits. It's a whole thing. It's not just, but he's smart, right? Because the idea is, if it were just songs, he'd just be another band.
Yeah.
So the fact is that the concept is what he's using to brand it. He also has, in my estimation, one of the top 10, 15 radio voices for that kind of music. And so he's able to succeed based on that. You know, he's also another person that works really hard at singing. It's not super duper easy for him, but he puts a lot of effort into getting better at it and doing all this stuff, to the point now that when he does it, it's effective and it's great.
Okay.
But there's, you know, and then I'm also working right now, I'm working on LaJean Witherspoon's solo record.
Oh,
So
really?
LJ's solo record, and LJ is the opposite of that. LJ is this ball of unique tones and talent and fire, and he has a poet's soul, and he's got this sort of like passion for everything. It's not even just music. He's just got this passion, and it's
Okay.
very unique, but it's also that thing where it's like he could sing any song, and most people, anyone who knows who Seven Dust is, would be like, oh, that's LaJean, because his voice just has that character.
Has that? Yeah,
So
exactly.
you have to approach those two situations completely different. You know, with Dustin, it's highly architect version. It's we're building things on a DNA level and trying to sprout new forms of life with his project. Whereas, and the production on the Starset stuff is massively important, because he wants a very, very specific sort of tapestry in which to sing over. So it works because, you know, the branding of that band is hyper successful. And yet with LJ, of course, we don't want to make a Seven Dust record for his solo record. So we have to sort of step outside of everything that everybody thinks he's going to do and do other stuff. So far, the people who have heard what we're doing are pretty stoked. So the idea of how did I approach LJ? Approaching LJ is more of finding out what motivates him emotionally and getting him to translate that into performance. And if
Okay.
he gets it, if we capture those moments where he believes it, I mean, it's very important when we write these songs. I interview him and get him to tell me stories about stuff so that we can write together.
Oh, really? Do you is it trying to get him in a certain headspace?
I think because he's done 25 years of rock interviews and 25 years of answering questions, that he forgets that a lot of his relevant sort of like crossroads in his life are actually places that he could write about, because he said it so many times in the context of Seven Dust interviews.
Okay.
And I think that he doesn't not that he doesn't understand, but he doesn't realize that there's gold in all of those moments because they're all personal to him. They're not band moments. They're personal LJ moments.
It's almost like Lejeune has melded with Seven Dust, and it's almost like they become one in his mind. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying more that he's lived a remarkable life being in that band, and he doesn't realize that a lot of the things that he's gone through, both positive and negative, while he's been in the band, either band related or not band related, are just things that he could write about.
Okay.
Like he's like, a lot of times I'll bring stuff up and he'll be like, oh, I didn't even think of writing a song about that, because it's not something he's ever done in Seven Dust. You know, Seven Dust has its own system of writing material. So in terms of how we've been approaching it, it's been really fun because he's been able to express himself personally through these songs, which is something that I think if you're doing a solo record, you better do.
Okay.
You know?
That completely makes sense, man. One last question for you, because I just looked and I just saw I can listen to you talk forever, man. It's like I love the way you think. When you yourself are creating music, whether it be in a producing vein or in a writing vein, do you have a special place that you kind of go? Maybe not even physical. Maybe like a special place you go in your head.
Are you talking about raw stuff?
I'm talking about
or just
raw.
With anything.
I'm talking about raw, but I'm also talking about if you're producing, of course, you're creating just as you would with raw. So do you have to get your mind in a certain place?
I do it all day, every day. So it's not there's an autopilot aspect to producing for me at this point.
Okay.
I've seen, most of my job as a producer is sort of psychoanalysis and therapy sessions.
Okay.
So I think half of my skill set as a producer is reading body language and understanding the people I'm dealing with and speaking to them in a way that they understand what it is that I need to get out of them. And whether you're dealing, what I used to say 10 years ago, 12 years ago, when I was really just working with smaller artists was, they're so uneducated. They just need to be educated on like all these principles about how things work and all this other stuff. But what you actually find out is guys who have been doing the same thing for many, many years. And I'm talking about LJ, but I'm sorry. I started working with Jason Hook as well. I've worked with other people who, Nikki Sixx, I did Motley Crue songs. And what's interesting is they have varying levels of sort of acceptance of how wide the picture can be and how narrow the picture has to be. Okay. So like someone like Nikki Sixx is a great example because Nikki wants the picture to be really big, but he's so smart and educated and sort of aware that he knows if we're writing a Motley Crue song, it's got to be a Motley Crue song. So, because I helped write The Dirt. I'm actually singing all the background vocals on all those new Motley Crue songs. But
okay,
the interesting part is that it's all a sliding scale. Some people want to, so sometimes my job is to coach them to realize their goals. Because sometimes someone will come in and they're not exactly sure exactly what the target is. And I might not even know, but I know how to get them to verbalize what it is they really want. And once you've done that, once you've got a clear target, then it's just sort of like actual work. You just do the work to get there. But my personal psychology as it pertains to producing, if I'm doing something that's leaning pop, because I do work with pop artists, if I'm doing something that leans pop, I go a little bit deeper because for me, pop is a more difficult challenge. I think trying to come up with something that has depth, color, and is also commercial and easy to listen to is a lot harder than coming up with something that's sort of complex, self-indulgent, and sort of far-reaching. So being just poetic and artistic in a rock song for me feels easier because it's something that it's sort of a muscle I've flexed so many times that I'm just letting it be. But if I'm working in a pop context and I'm trying to compete with artists in the world that are doing incredible amounts, you know, I talk a lot about Post Malone and all this stuff with my artists, not because I want them to sound like Post Malone, but I want them to understand the secret sauce of why projects like that work and why something like Post Malone can be played at a party and be background music, and yet you can also go into your car and listen and go deep on it. So it's satisfying both aesthetics. And most rock, that's tough to do with rock. It's hard to get a rock song that you could just put on at a party in the background and all the girls are like, turn that off. Because they can't dance to it, and it doesn't have a clear sort of emotional texture to it. Because again, like I said, we've done so many of the things we've done with guitar, we've done them a million times. Yes. So when you hear guitar, bass, and drums, how many times can we listen to that combination before it just becomes sort of noise? And especially for people who aren't necessarily rock fans, then it's extra noise, right? Because if you put on a Chevelle song and then you put on a 10 Years song and then you put a Perfect Circle song and then you put on, you know, I Prevail song, to the non-rock listener, that's all the same band.
Meshes together for them.
Sure.
Totally
so
understand.
So I think that that's sort of the last frontier for rock. We have to figure out how to conquer that idea of creating interesting stuff that's in the background that's also in the front. And people may get mad when I say this, but guys like Youngblood and Grandson are sort of doing it. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, right? There's enough programming and there's enough coolness, but there's enough guitar and there's enough angst. They're balanced, and MGK to a degree. I'm not a huge punk pop. I think that's sort of a limited scope to pull from, but I think that, you know, all of that stuff is interesting to me because I feel like it's guitar based, but it's still young and interesting and serves its purpose of keeping up with the times.
Okay. Lastly, let's talk about when people can get your album. Does your album is out in March, correct?
So yeah, our pre-sale will begin February 1st. And if you order the pre-sale on rawband.net, you will be able to order the thing and you'll get it 2 weeks before the album drops. The actual album will drop March 19th. So yes, March 19th, Friday, March 19th is when the album goes live. But if you pre-sale it, you'll probably get it at the beginning of March.
Okay. All right. Awesome. And it's rawband.net.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Well, rawband.net, go there, pre-order Intercorrupted. You're not going to be disappointed. And I've loved the music from Raw for years, and I'm looking very, very, very forward to it. What do you say that we play Intercorrupted? Sahaj, thank you very, very much for coming on Rail Rock Nights. I really, really appreciate it, man. And hey, want to let you know too, I'm letting everybody know that I talked to you. This is your show. Rail Rock Nights is for the bands, and it's for the fans of those bands. That's the whole artist-listener interaction and experience. That's what it's all about. So you have something you want to promote. You have someone, I don't care if it's a 2-minute phone video saying hi to your fans. Send it to me.
Okay, all good, man. We will work it out. We'll figure something out for you.
And I will, whatever it is, I'll throw it on for you. This is Intercorrupted from Raw. It's right here, right now. It's on Real Rock Nights.